start.
I am Tony Serra. I have been a lawyer now 42 years. I was kind of hatched, let's just say, out of the Haight-Ashbury. And because this is a filming that relates to medical marijuana, I should say that right from the inception, I have represented marijuana users and alleged marijuana let's say merchants or dealers and alleged marijuana smugglers, right from, let's say, 1966 to present. So I have always been what I'll call pro-decriminalization, not only of marijuana, but of all drugs. I've always preached in a way that the criminal jurisdiction of court should not adjudicate or stand as some kind of a sanction for what is basically psychological and sociological phenomenon. And I'm talking about the whole realm of what's been termed victimless crimes. The court system is ill-prepared to talk about prostitution, ill-prepared to talk about alleged pornography, ill-prepared to talk about certainly marijuana and other drugs. They should be relegated to a non-criminal forum. No one ever should go to jail for a drug, no matter, what level in the hierarchy they find themselves. Then we're talking about marijuana, especially marijuana. And as everyone knows, it's a platitude, and those who are informed and those who have ears to hear know that marijuana has been a medicine for various cultures for between 2,000 and 3,000 years, and it has specific application, we are finding, to specific ailments or specific diseases. Foremost among those, since we're in California, it alleviates the wasting syndrome in those persons, and there are many who are either HIV positive or have AIDS. Wasting syndrome is major cause of death, and marijuana is the only known appetite stimulant. There's others that profess to be efficient, but they're not. And so this alone would justify the decriminalization of marijuana as medicine. But we also know that it helps in a number of what we'll call it psychological impairments, all the way from full-blown psychoses to personality disorders. I'm talking, mainly about depression, but not necessarily, because in the bipolar region, they have found marijuana to be efficacious. It cures or at least delays a number of other ailments. For instance, chemotherapy can kill in terms of inducing heart problems. The cancer is cured, but the patient died of a heart attack. So the harsh effects of chemotherapy are moderated by use of marijuana, and cancer, as we know, is one of the killers in this country, and therefore that's right down the middle. Lesser known things are glaucoma, and there's no question that's efficacious in counteracting blindness for people who have glaucoma. And there's a number of other people who have diseases that create spasms. It's been known to be very effective in counteracting that. So I have become, in the last 20 years, a medical marijuana advocate. And I believe strongly in its efficiency in counteracting a number of disease and illnesses. And so on that front, so to speak, I have been active, let's just say, in a number of dimensions. First dimensions is that I have specialized in court trials, jury and otherwise, in motions relating to Fourth Amendment liberties. And Fourth Amendment is the battlefield for medical marijuana and most drug cases. So early I had become what we'll call a student and a practitioner of Fourth Amendment rights. I've done many jury trials involving marijuana. I've done many jury trials, obviously, that involve other drugs, alleged, restricted, or narcotic. So I have a lot of experience. I'm kind of like the old guy from the Haight-Ashbury, the grandfather, you know, of marijuana decriminalization. I've been not only active in the court, that's the first dimension, but then I, you know, have always kind of stepped forward. As soon as Prop 215 was passed, I was on the front page of a number of legal magazines and papers because I was depicted, you know, smoking a joint with a recommendation saying it's legal now and throw off the booze. You know, the great lawyers have all been alcoholics. You know, there's a lot of pressure. And marijuana, you know, it mellows you out. It's actually, my first recommendation was because of I have a high stress lifestyle, and it medicates the stress. When I was in law school, and you know, it goes back a number of years, but when I was in law school, they told us if you're going to be a trial attorney, your lifespan is going to be 55 years. That was the average lifespan for a trial attorney. I've been a trial attorney for 42 years. You know, I'm way past. I'm over 70, so I've passed the 55 mark, and I attribute it to medical marijuana because I can put things in perspective. I can eliminate stress. I can be neutralized in terms of anxiety. It's been a wonderful thing for me. So in addition to practicing very zealously in the medical marijuana field, I have also been a participant now for probably 50 years in the use of marijuana. And as I look back, it always, you know, you say, oh, well, it offers enhanced perception. It offers enhanced aesthetic appreciation. It is a pathway to spirituality. It is a sacrament. So that's the way you start. And it's aesthetic and blissful, and it's communal. So there's a bonding with your fellow men and women. And then when you look back, you see also it was always medicine. It was always something that, in essence, you know, placated anxiety, at least for me. So we're talking about maybe my history. One is I've litigated it. Medical marijuana at every level, and fought for it. I've secondly offered myself as an example. They say that a trial lawyer's mind must be like a steel trap, that you have to have pretty close to a photographic memory. I was a philosophy major at Stanford. I always got high grades. I was in the top part of the law school, Bolt Hall, UC Berkeley. My academic pedigree is well known. I go from trial to trial. My mind has not been in any effect, how would you call it, stultified by 40 plus years of use of marijuana. My mind is acute. Many people my age, you know, are in the pre-senility stage without, you know, using marijuana. So, you know, I kind of offer myself as an example. Hey man, you know, I still read half the night. I still get up early in the morning and read, and I go into court and I can remember everything. So it hasn't affected my mind, and I know there's many other, you know, lawyers, I don't know, who become judges. I know that there's many people in high places, let's speculate, in the business world. I know there's a lot of people who would look like they would be conservative and guarded with respect to attitude toward medical marijuana, but who are users. And you know, some of them are my age and most of them are much younger. So the third dimension is what it's part of activism, and so I do, you know, appear when I was younger more frequently, but at public forums. I've debated U.S. attorneys on decriminalization. I have been interviewed with respect to my views, and I have always been, whatever you want to call it, politically active in terms of trying to turn public opinion into more objective perspective with regard to medical use of marijuana and marijuana in general. So what are the battlefields right now? What's happening right now? And we're talking, the end of 2005. We have essentially a battle with the feds. This is federalism, revived. There has never been, I think, in the history of this country, but I'm not a historian, but certainly in the history of my practice, which has been 42 years, a stronger executive. And I'm talking about from Bush down to a police officer, on the corner. And this obviously reflects in prosecution, it reflects through the U.S. Attorney's Office in policy, and they have steadfastly, I'm talking about the executive, denied that there is any medical benefit to marijuana, and that is a falsehood. That is deceit. That is governmental misconduct. They keep it in Schedule 1, which is a scheduling of drugs and narcotics without any medical benefit. So we talk about heroin, and heroin is Schedule 2. We talk about marijuana, and it's Schedule 1. It's in there with speed and a number of other drugs that obviously have no medical properties. But that is one of the battlefields, the federal government's war perpetrated on disinformation and deceit. Marijuana is medicine. There's no question about it. Other countries, recognize it, and a number of states, thankfully, and we're up to about 11, have developed laws that allow it. But the feds are our enemy. They're the medical marijuana enemy, and they are ruthless, and they have ulterior motives. And their so-called war on medical marijuana will never, ever prevail. And even, as we speak, they are preparing search warrants to attack some of the dispensaries in California. The recent history has been 13 were raided in San Diego a short time ago. One was attempted to be raided here in San Francisco, and there was so much of a public outcry, the DEA narcs decided not to invade. But they had gone into the house of some of the proprietors of the dispensary, all legal under the state of California, all endorsed by the county of San Francisco. They confiscated something like 122 plants. Big deal, and we'll see whether or not they're going to prosecute. But they're on the attack. They have unlimited resources. Instead of guarding, let's just say, national vulnerabilities in terms of 9/11, they attack, it's like the chicken hawk going after the chick, because these are, for the most part, people who have disease or illness, for the most part, very idealistic, not profit-taking people. And for the most part, they need their medicine because no other medicine has been found to be efficacious. So what's the federal government doing? They're attacking, and this is a metaphor, the lame and the blind in order to preserve the fiction that marijuana is dangerous and marijuana has no medical usage. And so we fight that. Wherever, a dam erupts, we, the activists, and we, the medical marijuana defense lawyers, we rush to it and try to plug it and not make it, like a propaganda device for the prosecution. The next war, let's just say, is that the United States, as you note, through means that, from my perspective, are unlawful, tries to infiltrate the policy and the law and the police departments of other countries. And they do this overtly and covertly. They do it by giving resources, and they do it by planting their own informants and even their own agents in foreign countries. Now, a lot of this doesn't pertain to marijuana. I'm talking drugs, and a lot pertains obviously to cocaine and methamphetamine and heroin, the opium trade, but it also pertains to marijuana. And they've done serious damage in Mexico. Remember the paraquat scandals, poisoning marijuana so that the users would get some kind of reaction in terms of their lungs. So thankfully, under the Bush administration, at least South America, through a voting process, a democratic process, is rejecting and defying our presence and propaganda and even our handouts. So I see a turn here. The neo-colonialism or the neo-imperialism under Bush, has been acknowledged by European countries and South American countries, and that ultimately will deter the far-reaching effect that has when they infiltrate governments and when they infiltrate other, police agencies in foreign countries and try to work from the bottom up, destroying whatever their economy. We've seen Bolivia, go back. Coca is going to be legal, thank God. Coca is not cocaine. Coca is something that's been used in the in South America, in the Andes, for I dare say centuries. One thing that is very heart-rending about the medical marijuana wars is the unity that is brought between psychiatry, medicine, and law. And I've watched the history, let's say, of the marriage of the psychiatry and medicine and law, and it goes back and forth. In the old days, in the 60s, juries really wanted to be educated by expert witnesses. So they were receptive to opinions, for instance, on the use of marijuana, whether it was the old issues, is it addictive, is it habituating, what's the detriment, what about short-term memory loss? So they were receptive to an honest appraisal by an expert. Then, for some reason, unconnected with Bush or Republican conservatism or falsehood, the pendulum swung, and they didn't want to hear, even in cases like murder cases where the person's an obvious psychotic, well-documented schizophrenic. They didn't want to hear that anymore. And we're just coming back to offering experts. And so we have a number of psychiatrists and psychologists and doctors who practice in the field, or once again, one, going into the courts to educate the juries, and two, themselves, like a number of lawyers, being medical marijuana activists. And the strength in the union between the medical marijuana activist lawyers, the medical marijuana activist users, the medical marijuana activist dispensary providers, and now the medical field is, a beautiful thing to see, because I see it from the inside out. The dedication and the loyalty and the sacrifice for a principle. And understand, in general, what that principle really is. We've all heard this metaphor, it's a cliche, but medical marijuana is the miner's canary in assessing the ultimate constitutional freedoms in this country. Now, they don't want to look at it like that. Government sure doesn't want to look at it like that. Remember what the metaphor is? The miners, you know, they're down in the mine, and if there's not enough oxygen, they carry around a little canary in a cage, and unfortunately the canary, he drops unconscious, and they know they got to get out. Well, likewise, we must be free to use our medicine. And everywhere that government seeks to deter and seeks to punish and seeks, you know, to oppress by unfair laws and unfairly administered laws, the miner's canary suffers. What does that mean? It means that it is ultimately a diminishment of fundamental liberties. Look, let's weigh and balance. What are the detriments of marijuana? It's only propaganda. There's really no heavy detriments. What are the benefits? Because they do a weighing. You got to weigh. It's called balancing. What you know, are the benefits? Well, they're multifarious and well documented in other countries that have been allowed to do testing and, you know, develop statistics in regard to use and abuse. So, you know, scientifically, we have it. And for a country to turn its mind and its back on the scientific evidence is a great tragedy. So we must be outspoken, we must all join our voices, and, you know, maybe the tide will turn. They used to talk about law enforcement as being, you know, the thin blue line between chaos, you know, and whatever threat and potential hurt to society, and peace and tranquility and democracy, the thin blue line. In the medical marijuana field, it's not a thin blue line. It is a thick blue wall that has encircled us and is suffocating our liberties. So it's a worthy battle. It's the miner's canary. It's the Fourth Amendment. It's ultimately the freedom to use medicine. It's ultimately the triumph of enlightenment and truth over, you know, falsity, defamation, and a policy of disinformation and deceit engaged upon by the U.S. government as a strategy. So, you know, we can talk about 9/11, and we can go into the airports and be searched. We can go into the courts and be searched. And there can be great panic instilled in the public. But the real fight here for us is to secure our civil liberties, and medical marijuana is really the symbol of that. So, you know, for the rest of my practice, I'm certainly going to have that as a priority. There's more and more persons who are joining that, and ultimately truth will prevail.